Hi, welcome. I'm Debbie Gardner-McCullough, a narrative and executive communications coach from New Zealand, based in Wisconsin. Welcome to the Sage Sayers. While numbers have dropped this year to the lowest in 3 years, New Zealand, the island nation in the South Pacific, still has a significantly high rate of suicide, especially among youth and elders and among men versus women. In New Zealand, men are 3 times more likely than women to take their life. Meanwhile, the most recent, meaning September 2020 UNICEF report, looked at 41 countries from OECD and the European Union and placed New Zealand at second to last in terms of suicide rate among adolescent people aged 15 to 19 years. Lithuania was last, and yet for years, New Zealand has stayed at the bottom. With me today, I've my guest named Marc Anderson. Welcome, Marc.
Good morning, or good morning in New Zealand. I think it's good afternoon in the US. So yeah, lovely to be here.
Yes, sir. And Marc is a builder, he's an entrepreneur, and he's also a survivor of attempted suicide. Marc also is my pro bono client. So we welcome you, Marc, and you're calling in today from Christchurch, and it's very early for you, before 6 a.m. So thank you.
No problem at all.
So knowing that you've suffered from depression for many years and that New Zealand's suicide rates are something that you notice and track, what do you attribute that pattern to?
Well, it's really hard to put a finger on. I think if the experts had been able to put a finger on it, we wouldn't be dealing with the statistics that we have done for the last 20 odd years. But you being from New Zealand, Debs, will appreciate that in New Zealand and Australia to a degree as well, who has a terrible suicide rate as well. We have a culture and we've been brought up with a harden up sort of attitude, and men are encouraged to just brush it off and not talk openly about how they're feeling. Um, and uh, and we arrive where we are today. I think if anyone knew what was the panacea, what the elixir was,
Yeah,
then they'd be dealing with it. But we don't know,
right.
um, and I know from my own personal experience, growing up, even as a teenager, when you were going through mental anguish and things like that, it was you were told to just deal with it, to harden up, brush it off. And um, so for all these years, we've kept our emotions, we've kept what's hurting us inside bottled up.
Yeah,
And the analogy I have is every time you have something of significance happen in your life that mentally strains you, it's like just a leaking tap. It's like and that leaking tap is dripping into a very large bucket, and over the course of a year, of your life, sorry, that bucket slowly fills up, and it gets to a point where it starts overflowing. And for me, the metaphor for me, the analogy for me was when I had um, my breakdown, was my bucket started overflowing because I just couldn't contain it anymore.
yeah,
Um, so we've got to come back to the root problem, the root cause of it. And we've got to encourage all our men, all our people, but in
yeah,
particular men, um, to be more open with their feelings. And a key one for me is to teach men, especially young men, to be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable.
yeah.
It's okay to um, it's okay to be unwell. It's just not okay to be sitting in a room by yourself trying to deal with it. You
Yeah.
need to share these problems. So
And that's
um,
a great segue into your own depression and your own attempted suicide
hmm.
attempt. I wondered if you felt comfortable sharing that.
Yeah, last year, beginning of last year, 2019 was like any other year. Came out of Christmas, New Year. It was fun times, summer, camping, holidays. Everything seemed very, very good in my life. And I put on a very good facade. Um, there's some interesting photos of me dressed up as a pavlova and in other bits and pieces, looking very jovial, very jocular. Um, and on the outside, I seemed like very, very happy-go-lucky. But on the inside, I was falling apart. And
Mm.
then towards the middle of last year, my marriage broke up. Um, my best friend, who we knew um, was battling cancer, passed away, and it was the circumstances in which he passed away which was so troubling for me. And then I had a number of other things going on, and I was also I wasn't aware of it then, and I used to defend myself vehemently from it. But I was a functioning alcoholic. Uh, Alcohol was such a huge part of my life, and I was using alcohol to get through the day, and I have done for probably 35, 40 years. So all those things combined to send me to a very, very dark place in July, August last year. And then early September, I found myself standing on a cliff edge in the hills behind Christchurch, and I was ready to check out. I'd already made a decision that I did not want to be here anymore. And I stood on that edge for a very, very long time. Um, and all the emotions that were going through, looking into the abyss. And um, but I managed to step back um, and um, and go home. I went to bed, drunk, crying. But the very next day, I'd made a decision I needed to get some help. And I reached out to an old therapist friend of mine, and that was the start.
Yeah.
Um, so been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, um, and it was terrifying. It's the worst thing to feel so worthless, to feel so lonely. I wasn't alone, but I was very, very lonely.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
And would you
I
say
was,
that's one of the things you learned from that attempted suicide? And how and what intervened? There was an intervention too.
yeah, an associate of mine, a friend of mine, who I did not realise at the time, but he'd 14, 15 months earlier lost a very close friend to suicide, and he'd obviously seen something in me, in the way I was carrying myself, that really troubled him. And he came up to me just out of the blue. He just came up to me, pretty much tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Mark, I see you. I can see you are in pain. Um, if you want to talk, um, please reach out." But he also said something else, and this is what resonated with me, and this is what stepped me back from that edge. Was um, he said, "You need to know that you're loved.
Mm-hmm.
We do love you. There were a lot of people here that really care for you." And then he said the thing that stopped me. He said, "Wherever you are, whatever place you go to, please promise me that you will be the very, very best version of yourself that you can be at that moment."
Yeah.
And that expression for the 4 to 5 days leading up to my attempt just kept going round and round in my head, and that's what distracted me and stopped me from taking that last step. And uh, so yeah, that stepped me back and put me in the car and got me back home, and that saved me. So yeah, that's the intervention.
And I'm so glad, Mark, that you're here with us. And I know you're having this year a phenomenal year. You've lost weight, you've recovered from alcoholism, you're balancing an entrepreneurial venture alongside your full-time job as a builder and project manager. If you could isolate what's helped you most with your excellent recovery, what comes to you?
There's a whole host of factors, um, but the one thing I come back to all the time is nutrition. I was eating, obviously I was drinking excessively, but my diet was just absolute rubbish. It really was high fat, um, you know, just not nutrient dense. I wasn't getting anything I wasn't nourishing my body. And as a result of that, um, my mental headspace was terrible. When you're mentally ill, we often talk about walking around in a mist, in a fog. Um, it's like um, it's like walking around looking through an opaque shower curtain. And um, so once I changed my nutrition, things changed. And I'm using a superior nutrition program, and I've bought into the wellness concept, and everything from all the improvements come from me starting to feel better on the inside, and that comes down purely to my nutrition. Now, after that, it gave me the clarity to look for the good things in life and get rid of the crap things in life. But it always comes back to my change in nutrition.
And you also became a spontaneous doer of good deeds?
Yeah, paying it forward. I've got a wee reputation here in Christchurch, New Zealand, especially around this time of year. Actually, we're coming up next month. I'm known as the BP Santa. So I like to go and just do random acts of kindness. But in particular, I've got a fuel card for work. And when I go in to get my coffee, because I'm a coffee snob, I will casually look into the forecourt and go, "Oh, that car there," and I'll just go up and say to the attendant, "I'll cover the fuel on pump 13 or pump 14," and then I like to pay for it, get my coffee, and then scarper. But I usually hang back in the forecourt in my car just to see people's reaction.
And there's also, sorry to interrupt, there's also this delightful give back to male mental health. You're belonging to two different support groups for men throughout New Zealand and Australia. Share that with my audience.
Yes, I'm involved with two groups, one in Australia. We're rebranding it, but at the moment it's called the 300, and it's a group of men about my age and we chat every day, live chat, and each individual in their group have had their own troubles in their own way. Some of them have got physical, some of them mental, and we bounce off ideas off each other. We challenge each other. What we're teaching each other to do is to have empathy, and but we're also confronting with each other, and it can be quite deeply personal at times, but it's really, really empowering, and I love it. And it's I believe I'm the only. There's only two of us in New Zealand, but there's quite a host of us from Australia. So that's the 300, led by a couple of gentlemen who really, really powerful gentlemen, Dean and Ben. Ben we call the Bull Ant, and that's to do with his gym exercise. And then I'm involved with another group here in Christchurch called the Christchurch Men's Collective, which is again once a month. We just encourage everybody to come together and chat, because it's just staggering how men have just not been taught to share, been taught to be vulnerable. And I'm talking some of these people that meet. We're talking in previous lives very, very ugly human beings, but they're men who want to make a change, and society's given up on them, but we haven't. And every month we get together and we have a chat and we talk about some very confronting issues. We talk and we just go there and we put an arm around the other participants there. And the one thing we never, ever, ever do is we never, ever judge. And that encourages these guys to slowly open up. and it's fabulous. And there's a man here who's driving this, gentleman called Matt Brown, and he's done a couple of significant TED Talks. You guys may be familiar with TED Talks.
Yes, sir.
And he did one in Christchurch, New Zealand, and it's still up on YouTube, and it's incredibly powerful. And if anybody can actually find it, it's
I'll try
I
to
strongly recommend it. Yeah, I strongly recommend you have a look at it. If it doesn't leave a tear in your eye, then there's something wrong. You'll need therapy, I think, because there's no way you cannot be moved. So it's driven by Matt, and he's doing amazing things for men's mental health and family violence in particular, to help stop family violence. And I'm really proud to be involved with both those groups. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mark. And just in closing, if there was any advice you could offer my viewers about vulnerability, empathy, being open, what comes to you?
Well, I just look at the changes in my life. One gentleman came to me in one moment in time. Here's the thing: try this. If you see someone, take one moment in time to make one comment to one person in the hope that you'll change one life. That's it. I call it the power of one, and I'm trying to develop this concept. And I believe that there's something in this power of one that could grab some traction. That might be a way to start connecting with people. Look, if you think someone's troubled, what's the harm in going up and asking, "Are you okay?"
Yeah, absolutely.
If they are okay, fine. But if they're not, you've at least made the effort to reach out, much like my guy did 15 months ago. So it's a win-win situation, and it's something. You know, I saw a statistic the other day. For the last 20 years, 800,000 people globally take their own lives. Okay, that's 800,000. I know we're currently going through a sort of a pandemic thing where people are collectively losing their shit, excuse my French, but 800,000 a year. And that's been a similar number for the last 20, 25 years globally. Crunch the numbers, people, and tell me that's not a story that needs to be talked about on a more regular basis.
That's
And
right.
suicide is a story that people struggle to talk with, and I want it to become a comfortable discussion. Just anywhere it can be had anywhere around the globe.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure and an honor having you on our show today.
My pleasure being here. Thank you for giving me the audience to have a chat with you. I really appreciate it.
I loved it. You're wonderful. Take good care, Mark.
Will do. Bye-bye.
Bye now.